In this video from IT Free Training, I will look at some of the new features available in Windows Server 2012. There are a lot of new features in Windows Server 2012, so let's get started. Listed here are the new features in Windows Server 2012 that this video will look at. This video will help you decide if your company should purchase or upgrade to Windows Server 2012. I will now have a closer look at each of these new features in more detail. Windows Server 2008 introduced the Server Core interface. If the administrator chose to install Server Core, the server would run with only the command prompt and would only be able to display the simplest of graphical interfaces like that used in Notepad. The problem was the administrator had to choose at install time if they wanted to use Server Core or the full graphical interface, and it could not be changed later unless the whole system was reinstalled. Unlike Windows Server 2008, Windows Server 2012 allows you to switch between Core and the full interface at any time. It also introduces another interface type called the Minimal Interface, which is between the full GUI and the Server Core interface. The decision which interface you want to use comes down to personal preference and also which features are available in that interface. As shown here, the GUI interface is simply a feature of the operating system. To remove the GUI interface, all you need to do is remove the feature and restart the server. If you are running Server Core and want to use the graphical interface, it is a simple matter of adding the User Interfaces and Infrastructure feature to Server Core using PowerShell and restarting the server. No longer do you need to make the decision at install time which interface to use and be stuck with that interface. Although Server Core is not new in Windows Server 2012, Microsoft has improved Server Core. With Windows Server 2012, Microsoft has increased the number of roles that are supported by Server Core. Out of the 19 roles in Windows Server 2012, 12 of these are available in Server Core. Previously, only 9 were available in Windows Server 2008 and 10 in Windows Server 2008 R2. As shown, these roles are not supported by Server Core. This is an increase from the 9 roles in Windows Server 2008 and 10 roles in Windows Server 2008 R2. In Windows Server 2012, Server Core also includes support for SQL Server. Previously, you would not be able to run SQL Server in Server Core. Microsoft has done a lot of work on Server Core to make it a more viable option for administrators. The next big change is to Server Manager. The interface of Server Manager has changed significantly. The idea behind the changes is that the administrator would be able to access most administration functions from Server Manager. You will find that a lot of administration can be performed from Server Manager, and there are links to launch tools and troubleshooting information. The next major change is that you can now manage pools of servers from Server Manager rather than just the single server. For example, if you wanted to install the same role on multiple servers, it would be quite easy to do from Server Manager. If I were to open Server Manager, you would notice that the interface looks very different from Server Manager in Windows Server 2008. At the bottom of the screen, notice that for each role that is installed on this server, there is a tile. This gives the administrator some shortcuts to access the role and configure it, and also provides additional information on how the performance of the server is going. On the left-hand side, you can select the option Local Server to obtain information about this server. This will give you basic information about the server, for example, if the server has remote management enabled. The next option down, All Servers, shows all the servers that you can configure in Server Manager. In this case, there is only one server listed. If I right-click All Servers and select Add Servers, I can add an additional server to the list. Once the server is added, I can configure multiple servers at the same time. For example, if I had multiple servers that I wanted to install this DNS role on, I could, from this server, install the role on all the required servers at the same time. If I select ADDS on the right-hand side, this will show you information about Active Directory domain services. This will show you a lot of information about Active Directory, not just on this server, but on other servers with the Active Directory Domain Services role installed on them. If I scroll down, notice information like events that have been generated, the current status of the service running, the best practices analyzer, performance, and the roles and features installed. The idea is Microsoft has grouped a lot of useful information in the one window, making it easier for the administrator. If I select the last option, File and Storage Services, notice that additional options appear, allowing the administrator to create storage pools and shares, among other things. You can start to see how much administration can be done using Server Manager alone. The next feature that I will look at is storage spaces. This is available in Windows Server and Windows 8. This feature allows you to combine multiple hard disks together to form one storage space. These can be internal or external hard disks. For example, you could combine an internal hard disk with a hard disk connected by USB. Once you have the storage space configured, you are free to divide this area into separate drives, just like a physical hard disk. This newly allocated space will appear in the operating system as a drive and can be assigned a drive letter. Storage spaces also support redundancy. This means that if a hard disk fails or is disconnected, you will not lose any data. Your data will still be available. Storage space also supports thin provisioning. This means that space on the drive is only required when it is needed. For example, if you created a 100 gigabyte drive that was only using 1 gigabyte of space, it would only take up 1 gigabyte of space in the storage space. Thin provisioning is often used with virtual machines to make the best use of space available. The next feature is the Resilient File System, or REFS. This is referred to as a next-generation file system with the aim to replace NTFS. NTFS has been around since the 1990s and has been improved as needed. In order to implement some new features in the file system, a completely new approach was taken in how data was written to the hard disk. This helped reduce the chance of corruption in the metadata. The metadata is the information that Windows uses to locate your data on the hard disk. This includes checksum on data and the metadata in case there is a problem with the hard disk. The new approach allows REFS to be self-healing. Self-healing means that as problems are encountered on the hard disk, they can be fixed, often without having to unmount the drive. If the drive is a system drive, then unmounting the drive would often mean problems could only be fixed if the computer was rebooted. REFS reduces downtime by reducing the number of reboots required to fix hard disk problems. There are some limitations if you do decide to use REFS. REFS does not support the following. It does not support booting, so you cannot use it for the system drive. This means for the present, you will only be able to use it for data drives. Next, it does not support software disk quotas. If you need to use disk quotas, you will need to use NTFS. Next, REFS does not support EFS encryption or compression. If you need either of these features, you will once again be stuck with NTFS. Lastly, since this is new technology, the file system will only work with Windows 8 or Windows Server 2012. It is possible that Microsoft will release updates to allow the file system to be used on previous operating systems and address some of the shortfalls that I have mentioned. With all these changes to file storage, there also comes a new protocol, SMB 3.0. SMB is the protocol that is used to access network shares. With an SMB3, there are a lot of improvements. First, the protocol allows block features. Block features mean that the low-level data on the drive can be accessed. This is generally used by low-level tools like disk fragmentation and some backup software. Previously, if you required block access, you would need a physical hard disk connected to the server, or you could also use protocols like iSCSI. iSCSI is a protocol that allows computers to access a hard disk over the network like it was a physically connected SCSI hard drive. SMB3 also provides high availability features. For example, it allows transparent failover. For example, often when a server hosts a file share and it was to fail, the user was redirected to a different server and the process would result in a dropped connection. The computer would reconnect to the file share on the new server, but the process was not smooth and was noticeable to the user. Hopefully, with SMB3, when a server fails, the user will be redirected to another file share containing the same data, and they may not even notice. The next feature is SMB multi-channel. In high-performance environments, an administrator may choose to combine multiple data paths into one. This may be for redundancy or performance reasons. There are a lot of new features in SMB3. The last feature that I will look at is it allows virtual machines to be hosted on a file share. Although performance may be slow running a virtual machine over a network, SMB3 supports it. The next feature that I will look at is Direct Access. Direct Access is available in Windows 7 and Windows Server 2008 R2, but it has now been improved. The most noticeable difference is that it no longer requires IPv6. Previously, Direct Access required IPv6, so often the administrator had to rely on transition protocols in order to get a connection back to the office over the IPv4 network. Direct Access is also much more transparent than before. If set up correctly, it should be able to connect back to the office without the user realizing that a connection has been made. For this reason, it has been designed as a replacement for VPN. Like traditional VPN software, it should allow the user to access the office via a secure connection. However, accessing the internet would be done directly via the connection that they are using rather than routing the traffic over the internet via the office. The advantage of direct access over a VPN is no additional software needs to be configured on their computer in order to get it to work, and the user does not need to worry about running any software to make a connection back to the office. The next set of improvements are with Hyper-V. Microsoft has released 10 features for Hyper-V and updated 7 old features to add additional functionality. I won't go through them all, just the main ones. The first one is there has been improvements made to the importing and migration of virtual machines. Previously, when you imported a virtual machine into Hyper-V, there may have been configuration problems. Hyper-V is a lot better at picking up this configuration and fixing problems. Hyper-V also supports live migration of virtual machines when the virtual machines are being used in a non-clustered environment. This makes it easier to move virtual machines from server to server as required. The next new feature is resource metering. This allows the administrator to track how much CPU, memory, and network resources are being used by each virtual machine. Using this information, the administrator will be able to better allocate and manage resources on the Hyper-V based on the virtual machines that are running on the server. The next big feature of Hyper-V is replication. Replication allows you to have one virtual server and replicate the server to a backup server located on another part of the network. The backup server could also be at a different site. Although these may seem like a high availability solution, it is not. Changes are saved up and transferred at once. This means the state of the backup virtual machine may be several minutes behind. Hyper-V allows snapshots to be recorded on the backup machine. This means that if your main virtual machine were to fail, you would have a choice of snapshots on the backup virtual machine to recover from. The solution is not a high availability solution. However, for companies that want some kind of redundancy and are willing to lose a few changes during the process, this can work as a low-cost disaster solution. The last feature that I want to look at is Remote FX. This was introduced in Windows Server 2008 R2 Service Pack 1. Remote FX allows a 3D animation to be rendered on the server and then sent to the remote client. This means that an old client that does not have 3D hardware can display 3D graphics even though it may only have a 2D graphics card. The big change with Windows Server 2012 is that Remote FX no longer requires 3D hardware in the server. In Windows Server 2008 R2, in order to use Remote FX, it required a supported graphics card. These tended to be high-end graphics cards, meaning the average 3D graphics card could not work with Remote FX in Windows Server 2008. Of course, if you use a lot of Remote FX on the server without a good graphics card, this will put more strain on the CPU and cause performance problems. However, if you have only the old, rarely used application that needs a few 3D graphics, this can save you from having to purchase additional hardware in order to get that application to work on your thin clients. Well, that's it for the new features in Windows Server 2012. Not a complete list, but does cover the major changes. I hope you've enjoyed this video from IT Free Training, and I look forward to seeing you in our other Windows Server 2012 videos. All the videos from this course and others are completely free and aimed at getting you certified in the IT industry. Thanks, and see you next time.